Okay.
All right, we will go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. On behalf of the National Career Development Association, welcome to the NCDA webinar series. We are pleased that you have joined us this afternoon. Before we get started, I want to share a little bit of technical information with you. During the webinar, please keep your microphone muted. We encourage any questions to be typed into the chat section, which can be found on the lower section of your screen. Our presenter will address those questions at the end of the presentation. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording link will be available on the NCDA website next week, as well as emailed to all of you. Individuals who have signed up for this webinar will be able to log into their accounts on the NCDA website to view their CE transcripts beginning next week. If you are a group that is attending, you will need to return a sign-in sheet to me in order to receive your continuing education certificate. This program is approved for 1 contact hour of continuing education. If you have any questions on continuing education, you can contact myself, Alicia Cheek, at NCDA headquarters. I would now like to introduce today's speaker. Madeline Liggett is an elementary teacher in the state of Michigan. She's beginning her 5th year of teaching, and her current position is in 4th grade. In order to promote career readiness at the elementary level, Madeline works closely with her local ISD and tech center. She also works on creating materials and lessons that align career development with academic content standards. She is currently attending Western Michigan University for her master's degree in workforce education and development. Madeline's end goal is to create her own academically aligned career development curriculum for elementary students. Thank you, Madeline.
Thank you. And thank you everyone so much for coming. I already feel like I have an idea of who's in the audience, what everyone's role is. And I'm really excited with the roles that I'm seeing, because I've found from presenting that you can make so many connections, and I'm sure there's so much I can learn from all of you. So if afterwards you want to talk some more, feel free to reach out. I'll have my email posted at the very end there. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and we'll get rolling. Okay. Can you put a thumb up if you can see my screen all right? Okay, perfect. So fueling the next generation, you'll find that I have a lot of car and automotive references in my presentation. My dad is an automotive technology teacher at our tech center. So he's been like the inspiration as behind why I'm so passionate about bringing that career education into our elementary classrooms. So Alicia basically covered everything. I'm in my 5th year of teaching. I teach in farm country where I grew up. So the classroom I'm sitting in right now, the one I teach in, is directly across from the hall. It's directly across the hall from the classroom I sat in as a 4th grader. So I'm back in the same district that I grew up in, which I feel really fortunate to be here. Getting my master's degree in workforce education and development. Kind of cool. My dad has the same exact degree, so it's been fun to just obtain the degree and use his support and input as I receive it. So that said, I'm a big believer that our career education needs to start at the elementary level, not just 1 or 2 lessons here or there, but really scaffolded all the way on up to K-12. So just to get things started, what do you all believe is fueling our next generation? So in other words, what do you believe is already happening to help our elementary students join the workforce one day? Or on another note, what do you wish was happening in our elementary classrooms to help get them prepared for the workforce? So whatever angle you want to take on that, and feel free to unmute yourself, or you can throw it in the chat, whatever you prefer. Okay, it looks like I have to oh, there we go. Now I have to unshare my screen in order to view the chat. So setting up classrooms like a business. I would love to hear more about that. Chromebooks are helping. Yep, more technology, see more experiences. Okay, so something I am going to talk about today is providing those experiences and bringing those experiences into the classroom as well. Okay, so my presentation is going to have 3 main objectives. First and foremost, creating a culture of career readiness in the elementary classroom. I've found that the best way I can promote this career education is really making my classroom all about it. So I would say at least 6, 7, 8 parts of our day and our daily routines are all about careers. And that really sets the foundation and the tone for the career work that we'll do throughout the class, throughout the school year. The second objective being the content standards. So knowing elementary teachers have a lot of curriculum to get through, especially if they are teaching all subject areas. How can we tie in those career lessons to the content standards so we're meeting our curriculum and district needs, as well as getting in those career education standards? And last but not least, how can we bring in those business and job experiences by using our CTE partnerships? So I want you guys to begin thinking about what you wanted to be when you grew up. I really want you to have the mindset as one of my 4th grade students for this next part of the presentation. So if in the chat, you could put down what you wanted to be. Being really transparent, I wanted to be a pop star. I cannot sing, and I once forgot my lines up on stage. So like pop star actress probably wasn't a good career choice for me, but that's what I really wanted to be when I was 9. Okay. Engineer, teacher, police officer. Yeah, I will say once I got to be like 12, I did want to be a teacher. So the pop star was very short-lived. Travel agent. Okay. What about like, did anyone want to be like an astronaut or an athlete? Students nowadays really want to be YouTuber. I always get a few YouTubers every year. Like that's what they want to be when they grow up. And I said, more power to ya. It's just so different than like when we were kids. Like nobody was a YouTuber when we were 9 years old. That wasn't a thing. So, okay, thanks for playing along with me. That was good. Oh, and there is our professional athletes. Okay. Oh, fun. Okay, so like I said, this part of the presentation is all about how I'm consistently every single day promoting career readiness in my classroom. And it starts from these career boards. So these boards are from 2 different years of teaching. At the beginning of the school year, I hang up these little photo clips that I found online saying their picture will be coming soon. And in my open house letter to parents, I always tell them, have your student begin thinking about what they want to be when they grow up. Because within the first week of school, all of my students get their pictures taken with a little Polaroid camera. And I know it's hard to see in the picture, but underneath their picture, they write what they want to be when they grow up. And this gets displayed in the classroom for everybody to see. And the fun part is, as we learn about careers throughout the school year, what students want to be when they grow up drastically changes. So on my board right now, I have several pro athletes, several YouTubers, actresses, and I always get like a really out there job, like, oh, I want to be a respiratory therapist. And I'm like, how do you know what that is? And they're like, oh, my family members are that. So quite a few of their careers up there are also what they know from family and relatives. So in a few weeks, I'll probably change it out. But this is the one on the right is the one from this current year because of course it has a car theme. So the students really enjoy this. So not only is that on my wall, but I also keep this flag up. It might seem kind of cheesy, but at some point in the school year, I always have kids come up to me and tell me, hey, Mrs. Liggett, that flag, like, I get why you have that here because we talk about careers. So at some point in the school year, they make that really cool connection. And then that picture on the left is of an employability skill that I teach. I'll be talking more about that later, but I try to be really intentional. If I have something up on the wall, it's either academically aligned, so like our content, like an anchor chart, or it's going to support the career work and the conversations that we have in the classroom. Because today, for example, I asked my students how they were going to be responsible and what it was going to look like for the assignment they were doing. And I consistently like turning around and pointing and referencing to that paper. So it's really, really nice to have up. When I was at NCDA in Anaheim this summer, my colleagues presented on elementary career readiness. And my colleagues mentioned something about having a career library. So a certain section of your elementary classroom completely dedicated to career books. And I love that idea and I wanted to run with it, but I only had like 13 books. So I'm still working on getting books. So instead, I took that idea and I turned into a career corner of my room. So it's this corner of my room that is specifically dedicated to all things career readiness. So a lot of things going on in this picture, and a lot of these things I'll talk about in more detail, but basically it's where we keep our career books, our workbooks that we do every day, responsibility stickers as part of my classroom management system. This wheel and letters are all my classroom management system based off of an employability skill, classroom jobs, my welding project, picture of my dad and I doing automotive work, an anchor chart as far as the occupations in the Middle Ages because we are studying it. So like all things career readiness go in this corner, and the students run this corner. They take care of the workbooks. I have students that help me with letters. They run the wheel. So this is it. And I just feel like having that dedicated part of my classroom really shows my students that this is something that we as a classroom, we value it enough to give it its own dedicated spot. And again, a lot of these things I'll talk more about. So these are a look at some of the books that I have in my classroom. I'm also a firm believer that just providing the literature for the students to read can be really powerful. You know, we have a half day tomorrow. It's going to be hard for me to talk about careers tomorrow, but at least I know the books are out there. And at some point, somebody is always reading one of these books. The book in the top right is actually a book that I bought after being at NCDA. So I met the author there, which was really cool. The book, there's a hat for that. That was actually introduced to me at a conference I spoke at last year. And each monkey wears a different hat, and it covers all 16 career clusters in the book, which I think is really cool. It's super, super cute. The one in the middle is like a 3-inch thick book, and it's the most amazing career book I've ever seen. It talks about literally any career you could think of as far as the career pathway it fits with, the education you need, the salary, and it talks about your relevant skills. So something I'll talk more about is having elementary students reflect on themselves and using that self-reflection to help us choose careers. And this book really hones into that best practice of that self-reflection. The two books on the left are really sweet because they just have jobs that you would not think of, very non-traditional jobs. The one on the left, I read in a page from it the other day to my kids, and the job was an ostrich babysitter. My kids were so mind blown. I could hear everybody like stop and like look up. So we have those conversations too, that our jobs are not just police officer, doctor, teacher, that like anything in society like has a job for, anything you can think of, like down to the person that made your ice cream. We talked about that today in Ben and Jerry's. So it just gets our kids thinking outside the box. And this is kind of a cute story. One year I was teaching career readiness, and I had a student tell the class he wanted to be a Lego YouTuber. And there's a few kids who, you know, kind of gave him a hard time about that. But sure enough, we opened that career book, and what was in it? A Lego YouTuber, like Lego model maker. And it was just so sweet to see that little boy's career be replicated in a book, and just self-assure that he really can be anything that he wants to be. And that's a story I'll never forget. I even have the goosebumps now, but that was a really cool moment for our kids. So literature, I think, is very powerful. It can go a really long ways with our students. This is probably my favorite thing I do in the classroom. I brought this to NCDA in Anaheim this year, and long story short, I'd broken my wrist. So my dad had to come in and like take apart this wheel and set it all up for me. It became a whole orchestra. But this thing's awesome. So I teach the employability skill of responsibility in my classroom. Again, I'll talk more about that, but I'm really intentional when I teach it. So like they're actually like measurable skills as far as what it means to be responsible. And each table group's assigned a color. So anytime that entire table group is showing responsibility. For example, most of my classroom transitions are based on timers. So I set a timer and say, these are the materials you need. You're expected to be down here, facing forward, voice off. So that goes with being complete and on time for responsibility. And if that table could do that, they would earn a letter. So that's not the only example. I mean, responsibility can look like a lot of different ways, but their goal is to spell the word responsible, and then they spin the responsibility wheel. which this is my second year doing it. And last year, my fourth graders, they were still obsessed with this wheel the last week of school. Like it didn't like lose the charm at all. So basically anything on this wheel is a privilege. Everything on it is free. And the way I explain it to my students is if you're responsible enough to earn all these letters, you're responsible enough to then earn a different privilege than the rest of the students. So some really popular ones are like choosing your spot in line, or all day they get to choose where they sit. This year's favorite one is I let them lie on the floor during instruction. That is a very big deal in the class because I'm very adamant it's polite that you sit up. So one privilege they can earn is lay on the rug while I'm teaching. But I've just based it off the class every year too. So some of the rewards I have this year, I didn't have last year. My favorite one is 10 extra minutes of recess. And they earn it for the entire class. So like if the yellow group spun and they choose their spot in line, only that group would. But if anybody spends 10 extra minutes, the entire class benefits from that group being responsible. And that becomes a really powerful conversation where my classmates are now thanking each other, saying, thank you for being responsible because now we get to go outside because you went the extra step mile and did that. My rules are if you complain about the privilege, no, like you do not get it. That happened once this year and has not happened again. I think they thought I was kidding, but when I didn't give them that privilege because they were disrespectful about it, nope, no one complains. If they fight about who spins the wheel, nobody gets to spin it either. And after telling a group they couldn't have the privilege because they complained, they knew I was really serious and no one's ever fought over spinning the wheel. So I try to be really firm. The privilege goes for the next day. Like if you have the privilege to bring in a stuffed animal and you don't bring it in the next day, that's a bummer. I say you're responsible enough to earn it. You're responsible enough to remember it. And that way it's really easy for me to manage because again, I tell them they're in charge of it. My students, the person who leads my morning, they write it on the whiteboard and I'm not in charge to remember your privilege. So that has worked really well. Students are really excited about it as well. This is the employability skill that I keep going back and talking about. Right before, I think it was 2020, I was piloting the West Michigan Employability Skills Network. It was myself, so Kent County, Ottawa County, and one other county. And the purpose of this pilot was to scaffold responsibility skills K-12. And each grade band received a different soft skill to teach in the classroom very explicitly. So this is the one I took and ran with. So when I talk about being responsible for the wheel, it's all about like complete and on time, integrity. And I have not taught follow through or accountable this year. I usually do once a week. So after COVID happened, it took a pause and it never really got started again. But I thought this was really powerful in my classroom and I saw like a change in behavior and I felt like it aligned with my PBIS model. So I continued doing it. I've continued making resources. And then one of my colleagues who worked on this, I still work with, and I do some things with this with him. So the PowerPoint will be linked to all of you, but there's like the link in here if you want to go to the website. Whenever I try to find what I need on a presentation, I always get flustered. So I won't even click on the tabs, but I encourage you to check it out because it also provides a sample of scaffolding employability skills. So like, I think grade 1 in kindergarten is like teamwork, hard work. And then all the way up to the employability skill of innovation, decisiveness, time management for those later grades. So that's the resource that I use. Okay. So another part of my classroom culture is just having classroom jobs. So I make very clear at the beginning of the school year that we will not rotate through jobs. There will be students who never get to do a class, like they'll get to do a classroom job, but not everybody gets to try out every single one. They're required to fill out a job application talking about like what makes them qualified for the job, why they think they're the best fit. So it even ties into that like persuasive writing piece that I have to teach every year. And that's how they earn the job. We only change jobs like a few times a school year. So this particular job application was my best one. This student is in charge of running morning meeting, closing circle, our happy birthday routine, which my kids take very, very seriously, career workbook, and anytime I'm out of the classroom, like they're in charge. So today, like for example, I had to do the announcements and I came back in, morning meeting was done and all my students were settled and they started number corner without me. So number corners are 20-minute math block. The first, I would say 30 minutes of the day are very self-run by these two individuals. So I try to use the classroom jobs to also make sure my students have autonomy over the classroom. But to be transparent, it doesn't always work. I did classroom jobs for about 3 weeks and my students weren't being respectful of one another. So I kiboshed it and we took a few steps back. And then I reintroduced classroom jobs about a month and a half ago. So just want to keep that transparency that it's definitely something that you have to teach. And it's definitely something that promotes these powerful conversations. And we talk about, if we are going to have jobs, just like you would in the workforce, we need to be following through on things. We need to be accountable, respectful, etc. So this is also a big chunk of my daily routine. For a long time, I really wanted to figure out how could I do career education in my classroom every single day, no matter what. And I started thinking about the things that I do every single day, no matter what. And what I landed on was morning work. Like no matter what is going on that day, my students have to come in the classroom and do something in the morning. So I made 30 weeks of morning work for my kids, all career readiness based. So the first 12 weeks are all employability skills, exploring different jobs, thinking about ourselves. The next 12 weeks are life skills based. So counting money, writing checks, practicing our address and our phone numbers and emergency contacts, things like that. Then the last 6 weeks are employability skills. So my students come in every day. They're expected to complete the journal prompt, complete it thoughtfully with complete sentences, store it correctly. And there's a student who's in charge of that. And then right after lunch, we go over it. So the second they come in from recess, we grab our journals, we go over it. I'm pretty stern this year as you come down. We do not start until every single classmate has it open and everyone's quiet and respectful. And that's a part of a day that my students also run. So I'm going to talk about this actually quite a bit because there's a lot more to the workbook than just the morning work. But I've linked it here as well. I think in the picture it says career journal, but I just updated it to say workbook and it's right here. It's a PDF you can download for free. Yeah, there's a lot more to it, but I'm going to explain that as well. So if you're interested in looking at that, that's where it's at. Okay. Oh, so this is an example of one student's work. This is actually the same student who runs my classroom in the morning. This is a good example of what it looks like to be thoughtful in your career journal. But again, not everybody's looks like this. That's something we're working on of being complete and doing a careful job, being attentive to details. So this is what 1 week might look like, and each week is themed. So this week was all about how to have etiquette in a job interview or while you're on the job. Oh yeah, so this is the other part of the workbook as well. So for classroom jobs, I keep a career catalog in their workbook because I got kind of tired of my kids asking me, what does this job do again? What's my responsibility as the mail carrier? So I just put it in the journal for them. So it's like a catalog. If you're looking through the newspaper, here are all the jobs, here are your responsibilities. And it even lists character traits. So if you can see, it says for catering, must be able to encourage classmates to say thank you. So if you're not, we talk about if you're not somebody who can say you didn't say thank you, you need to say that respectfully, that's probably not the job for you. And then all of the careers are also based off of actual career names, newspaper editor, secretary, things like that. I also use a workbook to take notes on all of our employability skills. So this is a sample of what that note page looks like. And then if we have an employer come in and visit our classroom, we brainstorm beforehand how that employer shows responsibility at their job. And then afterwards, we also follow up on what we learned about their responsibilities. And then we write some interview questions as well. So that journal has this workbook, I should say, has 3 different parts to it. And this is what it looks like all culminated. And my students each get a binder. I mean, I use my binders every year and my school pays for the printing. So it's very inexpensive and it lasts all school year. Okay, so here are my content standards though, because I told you guys I wanted to talk about content standards. for the career journal if anyone were to ever ask. So we use it for speaking and listening for collaborative discussions. And it doesn't say this in this content standard, but one part of speaking and listening is coming to discussions prepared, which is of course an expectation. And then I use it to focus in on complete sentences. My student who's leading the classroom right now, she started picking up like on how I teach, and she goes, "Wow, thanks so-and-so. That was such a great complete sentence." That's what she said today teaching. It was so cute. So I use it to focus on my complete sentences, capitalization, grammar, talk about like spelling words correct if we have a reference. So just those little tedious things that I might like, rush through. I don't want to say rush through, but this is a good time to really focus on those language skills. So that's how our content standards connect to that. So that brings us to actually our content standards. So I've been talking a lot, so I want to give you a chance to kind of process this and put something in the chat. But thinking about things that elementary schoolers learn, what do you think are some content standards or some topics that would align with your real life job? So for example, I taught human body this year and we talked about x-rays. My husband is an x-ray tech. So that job aligned with our instruction. So go ahead, if you could put something in the chat, anything content standard related that we could apply to a job. Counting money, definitely. I always think of fractions as such an easy one to go with, baking. Yep, organization. Okay. So for this next part, in the part after, I'm going to show you how I also found a content standard to go with the job and how I taught that in my classroom. Thank you notes, communication manners. Yes, all that looks great. Okay. So this having content standards and talking about this really boils down to 3 big questions. Why should I even embed this career awareness into my curriculum? And if I do so, what content standards should I even use? And where in the world do I find what I need to be teaching career related wise? So those are the 3 questions I'm going to get into a little bit in this next part. So I always tell teachers there are, several best practices that are research-based. That is the reason why we should be teaching career awareness. And it really starts with our career education has so many opportunities for engagement. Students get so excited when I tell them an employer is coming in, and it just provides that relevancy too as to what they're learning or when they might use this. So just some anecdotal data I have is just the faces on my students when my dad comes in and teaches with me, or my husband came in. They are excited and they want to learn. It's also very motivating to my students to see what jobs are out there and what they could be doing one day. Especially living in a farm country, some students haven't left the community that I'm in. So it shows them different jobs that they didn't even know were out there and kind of puts them in that position to think that could be me someday. So I think that's really powerful as well. And then career education, it needs to be sequenced so we can get the biggest bang for our buck. So rather than just teaching career education in middle school and high school and maybe once in 2nd grade, it needs to be sequential. So we need to be doing it at every grade level. And then that really fits into having developmentally appropriate lessons. So if we are doing it in 2nd grade, making sure that's happening. And then, so we're not losing out on our instructional time, it needs to be aligned with our academic curriculum because we are super tight for time. We don't have tons of extra times, so we need to be double dipping. So what content standards should you use when tying career awareness into your curriculum? These are my go-to ideas. I look for standards that are taught and assessed every single year. So fractions are taught every single year, and each year the standard gets more rigorous. So why not have a career awareness activity that's going to fit with a topic that your students are going to revisit again, especially because that topic aligned with an employer coming in is really engaging and really powerful, and it's something they can hold on to for later years. I also find writing standards are a really great way to tie in career readiness. I did an informational writing project with my 5th graders a few years ago. If you're familiar with Lucy Calkins, she does a writing workshop based approach to writing. So my students had to write an informational piece of writing. So I made it so they each picked a different career to research. So super individualized, yet it hit every single content standard that I needed to teach that curriculum. And that, to be honest, that's one of my favorite writing projects I've taught. That lesson was really, really fun to do. Also looking for standards that have a natural connection to career education, like fractions. Like, what teacher doesn't teach fractions without talking about like pie and pizza and somebody making something? You know what I mean? Like things like that, like it's such a natural connection. Why not bring in an employer and tie that into the math lesson? Also, anytime you have topics that can address multiple content areas, I have a colleague trying to help me bring in somebody for like geography, and it's going to help me address some science standards, social studies standards, and some writing standards. So again, if we can hit more bases than just one, that cross-curricular integration is really powerful. Standards that you have an employer connection. I taught human body. I knew my husband was an X-ray tech, so he could come in. So just like using those connections you already have. And of course, anything you love teaching. I found that if I love teaching something, I'm going to be doing some extra work for that anyways. So why not gear that extra work towards something like bringing in an employer? So those are my kind of go-to thoughts when I plan out a lesson and picking my lessons that I try career readiness to. And then I was going to have you answer the question at the bottom, but I feel like I already kind of answered that. So this one's going to vary for everybody, and I wasn't at first sure how to tackle this because where I'm at in Michigan, we do not have set career readiness standards. We have a career development model, so it provides guidelines for elementary, but there are not actually like set standards that I'm required to teach. I think some other states do though. I mean, well, like, could you guys provide me some chat or unmute yourself? Like, do your states have content standards for career readiness? Is it a guide like this? Because it's going to be a little bit different from everybody. What's your guys' experience with this?
We have stuff that, they talk about that they want us to talk to the kids about K-12. It's just kind of very generic, especially when it comes to elementary. It's just basically says exposure.
Okay, so that's basically what ours says as well then.
Yeah, no detail or anything. So that's why I had to create my own curriculum.
And it's one of those things. So when I try to bring in an employer, the vagueness can be used to my advantage because it can be interpreted so many ways. But then when it comes to, okay, how can I really be intentional? Then that's when I wish I had some like more detailed guidelines. So I use the career development model guidelines, and I would encourage you guys look at your own state guidelines and see what they have. And I mean, if anything, if your state doesn't have something, I feel like even just looking at what another state has is really powerful, just taking one small next step. So that would be my advice on what I would do. And like I said too, they're really vague, but if you're having your admin trying to get on board with something, you could really tie these in so many ways. So the career readiness library assignment was the informational writing unit I did. Linking core academics. So I'll talk about that next. So again, good things and bad things about being vague, but starting here and looking at what your states had would be my advice. So this brings me to the next part of CTE partnerships, where I sort of, culminate everything. Have you guys helped teachers bring in CTE partnerships to their classrooms? So like, have you brought employers into elementary classrooms? Is that going on where you're working? Is that something you're trying to help happen? I've done it a few times, and this year I'm trying to do that more, especially because it's something I'm putting into my put into my NCDA proposal for the national conference this year. So my goal is to get more partnerships in here and see how that then affects my students' success in the classroom. So just wondering what your guys' experience of that is. Oh, and someone also put in the chat about the National Counselors Association has standards. So Thank you for that.
I run a lot of career cafes in the mornings, so our bell rings at 7:25. So for 3rd through 5th graders, we have like a parent come in from 7 to 7:25, and they talk about their job, and you can come if you want to, and you don't have to come. But we usually have about 100 and something kids come every time. But the parents bring a lot of hands-on things, so that's what they love, and so that's been really fun.
Oh my goodness, you have the coolest job in the world to get to do that every single day with elementary students.
Not every day. We do it once a month. So,
Oh, okay, but it's still that you're pushing in and teaching lessons. You have a really cool job. Okay, so so that said, so like why the CTE partnerships? I definitely feel like that ensures that there's scaffolding between our grade levels. So if we're doing the sort of like employer visits at the elementary level, well, we know they're going to do some job shadowing or have some employer come in at the high school and maybe middle school level. So it gives them this exposure to begin with. It's not just starting in middle school and high school. We can really start young. So it goes back to that scaffolding. And for our elementary students, they might not ask it as much as high school students, but they definitely ask, when am I going to use this in real life? And to begin showing our elementary students that, like, yes, what we're learning is a career, is something that I also think is very powerful. Also going back to that excitement and engagement, my students were so pumped when I told them Mr. Liggett was coming in. And then, like Betsy said, when the parents bring in props, my husband brought in like a plastic skeleton. My kids thought that you would have thought he brought in donuts. They love that stuff, especially when he took the head off the skeleton. I thought like all my kids were going to suck the air out of the room, but they are just here for that. And then of course, building connections within our community. My husband works for Spectrum Health, and his work loved the fact that he was going out there promoting Spectrum and telling kids about his job. And I mean, my husband coming in is just one example. I could bring in people from our town as well, in restaurants, and just building up that connections between our communities and schools is really important. Oh, and then I included this picture because I teach automotive summer camp with my dad every summer. So this is my welding project. This is my best one. I've tried it like 3 years in a row. I like slowly learned how to weld each year. And then I actually brought some of my students that year I had in class to summer camp with me. So they like said goodbye to me on the last day of school. And then I saw them like the next day at summer camp. We were just bringing kids from all over our intermediate school district. And again, just building that connection within the community. Okay, so if you are bringing employers in and having these partnerships, like I've already mentioned, start small, connect with the employers that you already know, friends, family. The picture on the right is my mom and I at Harvey Lexus of Grand Rapids. Before my dad was an automotive teacher, he worked on cars at Lexus, and he still knows the people there because he takes his own students to Lexus. And the manager of Lexus has known me since I was like literally an infant. So just a really natural connection, very willing to let us come in. So I didn't have to, look high and low for an employer. I just started with what I knew. And now that I want more unique employers to go in, now I'm starting to reach out to my colleagues to help me. My best partnership is my father, of course. So my dad works at Kent Career Tech Center. So the tech center for all the high schoolers within our intermediate school district. The tech center has automotive, diesel, welding, graphic design, hospitality or culinary, agriculture, aviation, like you name it, like it's there. So the tech center is where I also go for connections. And what better connection than to have your dad come in and teach 4th graders with you. So I'm going to be talking about that next and that experience. And I've also included this cookie. This is a micrometer, a tool that my dad uses in his classroom. And the culinary class at the tech center baked my class these cookies from when my dad came in. So that was just so cool. My kids could not believe they had a cookie with a micrometer on it. So just getting the word out there. My dad told people what he was doing, and people are willing and wanting to come and help your classroom. Okay, so my dad comes in once a school year, and he addresses this content standard that I have right up there. This is a 4th grade content standard, specifically working on Oh, sorry, this is my 5th grade content standard. So 5th graders have to be able to read and write decimals out to the thousandths place, and 4th graders have to do it out to the hundredths place. So I've taught this lesson with 4th and 5th graders, and they're both very capable of doing it. And in 4th grade, the students have to be able to add decimals, which is also covered in this lesson. So I gave you a few clues: micrometer, a picture. Can anybody guess like what my 4th graders could possibly be doing with decimals and car parts? I'm going to look at the chat. I'm going to be really impressed if anybody gets this too, because this skill is just such like a weird skill that like I know and have, but it would never be helpful if my car broke down. Okay, the suspense is getting to me. I'm going to tell you all what it is. So, my dad teaches my students how to measure the thickness of a brake rotor using a 1-inch micrometer. So again, super useless skill if you're stuck on the side of the highway, but it aligns with my content standards. Awesome. And my kids love it. I go, this is a skill that you're going to have that you can just like tell people you have, and they're going to think it's so cool. So this is the brake rotor. This is a close-up of what the micrometer looks like. This is the exact same thing my dad does with his 11th and 12th grade students. So one time he came into my classroom and taught, and when he left, he went back to the tech center and taught the exact same lessons with his kids. And with the proper scaffolding, the 4th graders and 5th graders can absolutely do this with accuracy. So it's really, really cool to see. So that's a picture of my dad teaching 4th graders. He loves it. He goes, "Your kids are so small." I go, "Yes, they are." But he loves being with the younger kids. And he talks about employability skills and responsibility. We make a whole day of it, and I talk it up from the first day of the school year, because I tied into PBIS, being safe, because I would not want to drop a brake rotor on my foot. That would not be a fun conversation to call home about too if my student did. So here's where the content standards align though. So I mentioned the place value knowledge of decimals. There's also a connection to money, and I'll show you that in a second. And then my 4th graders, they get exposure to 5th grade content standards. And just being able to apply the decimal knowledge to this task, it shows my students higher level thinking. And then they're also exposed to career zones. So in the state of Michigan, the career clusters are condensed to 6 zones for our elementary students. So awareness of that zone, employability skill, and just real life application. So this is exactly what I show my admin too about what I'm doing. So that way it's very laid out as far as why this is so relevant to my curriculum. So I want to go into a little bit about what this looks like in my classroom. And I am watching the time, so I'm going to try to not go through this too fast, but still be respectful of everyone's time. So the first day is just focused on getting to know the micrometer. If you're going to be in the workforce, you need to be familiar with the tool that you're going to be using. So we talk about what the micrometer looks like, the parts, the purpose of the parts, and how to label it. And my dad brings in all the micrometers from his high school class, which my students love. They love that they're using the same exact tools as high school students. And they love even more that they could take my dad's class in 6 years and be able to use those same tools again. Day 2 is where students actually learn how to read the micrometer. So we take the decimal readings off this right here. I don't think you can see my mouse. The 1, 2, 3, and 4, like we take the decimal readings off of that, combined with the numbers on the right-hand side, and we have to add them all together. So they have to be able to read the decimals, write the decimals, and add the decimals. And we're short on time, so I won't show this video, but the video walks through students through how to do it, and it connects to quarters and dollars. And I don't know, the video makes like a cha-ching noise, and my students think it's the best thing ever. I keep saying that, but students are truly, there's a lot of engagement that comes along with this. And then it's the last day where my dad comes in. So I teach it by myself Monday and Tuesday. And then the third day is like that culminating day where we're no longer teaching, we're actually measuring it. So the first 2 days I teach using task cards. They literally do not put their hands on a brake rotor until that third day. So there's also a lot of buildup and excitement in that way. And if you can see behind my dad in the picture is a giant picture of a micrometer. Those are the posters he uses in his classroom. And then I start displaying them in my classroom when I teach it. So this is a look at my students. And then I'm going to show you a few other pictures. Again, trying to stay respectful of time. So what I do for this, like, because I make like a whole like mini unit out of it, is I just keep it all in a binder. And I keep my answer key with me. Just so every year I can just pull it out and I have everything I need to launch brake rotors. So I wrote this actually for my graduate course. And then I was like, you know what, like, let's just try it. And now it just becomes something my dad and I teach every school year. We also try to make improvements every year. So the first year we did it, we didn't have an answer key to the brake rotors. So it took us a really long time to check kids' work. So this is my dad in my classroom last year, us making like an answer key on these brake rotors before he came in. So in case you're wondering, I do have 14 brake rotors that sit at my house at all times. Like if you go out to my shed, there's just brake rotors there. So I haven't found a good way to store them, but when I bring them in, the kids love it. And then we have lanyards from Harvey Lexus, that partnership I mentioned before. We wear our Lexus lanyards. Our tech center gave us pencils. So just kind of adding in those accessories that my students really like. They feel really special. They get to do it. And just, again, promoting that community and partnership. Okay. Looks like I have about 10 minutes, but time for questions, I probably have 5 minutes. So I'll do this one really quick. My next step in this brake rotor unit is to bring in my dad's students. Normally it's just my dad and I, but I think it'd be really powerful to bring in high school students because it exposes them to teaching. There can be a mentor for my own students, and for high school students to teach and share with somebody else how to measure a brake rotor. That requires my dad's students to achieve that higher level of thinking. So we can both get that academic content out of it for us. Okay, last but not least, I did want to do a shout out because it's National Career Development Month. And I am interested if you want to throw in the chat how everybody's celebrating. This year I am celebrating by reading out of the world's coolest jobs every single day. We read the job together and then we talk about what career zone the job will go in, and then we chart it on a poster. 5 minutes of my day, if that. And again, the kids love the jobs in there. I read like a island caretaker the other day. So a very small part of my day. And then I also, before that, I did a lesson. This is written by my colleagues at the ISD, and it's all about exploring career zones. So we did the career zone lesson, so that way it would help us identify the jobs from the book. And for the art and poetry contest, I didn't submit anything, but I did want to include some art in it. I had my students all make labels that hang above our classroom tables. So instead of calling tables 1 through 6, now my tables have our career zones. So I dismissed them by like natural resources and agri-science, you can line up. Human services, you can line up. So each table has a different design based on the career zone, and students did that, design them themselves, and now we use it in our classroom. So this is, can't really see it, but this is what it looks like. They're just hung up there. The students really like it. This is during the school day, so my classroom's a little bit messy right now, but the kids really like that they had autonomy over that. So again, to respect your time, I feel like this reflection really covers everything we talked about. But like I said before, just building that culture in your classroom is really powerful, and being able to connect our content standards to career readiness is going to be the biggest bang for our buck to immerse that into our classroom. And then, of course, using your CTE partnerships to also bridge into our content standards, as well as provide that engagement for our students. So as Alicia mentioned, I really want to publish a book. I really want to publish curriculum. I'm in the process of convincing my father to write a book with me on this. I still have a lot to learn, but so that's a very, very far end goal. And then I also need some data. So I submitted my proposal for NCDA this summer, and I'm going to be doing data collection this school year as far as what do the numbers say about how this is working in my classroom. So data collection is my next steps, and hopefully down the road, write a book. And then this is a way to contact me if you have questions or anything like that, or want to connect further. But other than that, looks like we have about 6 minutes left. If any of you have questions, if you need to run, that's totally fine too. So thank you so much for coming tonight. I really appreciate it.
Well, Maddie, I certainly want to say that I appreciate you so much. This is Celeste Hall. I'm the K-12 representative on the NCDA board, and I asked Matt to do this for us, and just appreciate it so much. So does anybody else have something that they want to share with Maddie?
I just think you and I probably should connect, you know.
I'm going to tell you the same thing.
Yeah.
If you want to, I say, do you have my email?
I do. I just wrote it down.
Do you want to email me then? Because I would love to talk more.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I have a bunch of book recommendations for you because I have spent 6 years looking for books.
Okay, awesome. Because I want to add to my book collection. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you for Celeste for asking me to do this. I'm very excited to be here.
We have a question. Chat. Yeah.
Yes. It really wasn't, I would say. I think I need to do a better job of promoting this to my administration and all the cool things that come out of it. But because I connect everything to our content standards, I don't get a lot of pushback. The letters I talked about for my responsibility wheel, I give the letters out, but I let one student also hand out letters, and that student is like the student of like the month. So it also ties into our PBIS model. So with PBIS and content standards, they're pretty on board with it. And I've also been transparent and just say like, this is what I'm doing at the beginning of the school year. And I've said, hey, I'm trying to collect data right now. And they're absolutely supportive of that as well.
I just love the elementary and high school partnership.
Yeah, that's my favorite day of the entire school year. And like I said, I really want to step up my game and get some students in here to see how like my dad and I can just keep pushing it a step farther every single school year. I'd like to do it with more classes too. That just hasn't happened yet. There's been construction going on at school and I used to teach 5th grade. So in another year, so that's where I would like to be with that, is teaching it to more classes. If you guys, what happens? So that's a great question. And that's where I'm struggling. It does not necessarily move to 5th grade. I advertise this to teachers and I'm working to get some of them on board, but right now, truly it is nothing. And that's, I think, why it's so important that we get the word out. And that's, sorry, I just lost my train of thought, but yes, the short answer is nothing right now, but it's why I'm working to really convince my teachers as to what I'm doing and helping to promote this so it can continue. I did pilot something, employability skills, with a colleague of mine last year, and a pre-K teacher, myself, and a high school teacher all piloted it. So there were 3 of us in our district doing employability skills in that sense. So going from like 0 to like 3 in the last few years, like that was pretty cool. And I also have some connections with the agri-science teacher at our high school as well. We went to high school together, so working on trying to do some partnerships as well. Yes, seeing the other comments too. Thank you guys so much for coming. And again, if you ever want to reach out and connect like Betsy and myself, feel free to send me an email.
I did want to make one suggestion. So I've gone to colleges and I've talked to the senior elementary education majors, and I've taught them kind of how to incorporate career education into their curriculum. And so that's another idea that, you can do since you have a university there.
Oh my, yes, that's a fantastic idea. Something I've never thought about it, but That's such a powerful thing. Oh my good, that's an awesome idea. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it starts them off young because they're 21 and it gets them thinking about it like, okay, I can do this in my classroom.
Because I'm still in contact with some of my professors in high school or from
Yeah.
college.
Mm.
Oh yeah, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions or anything like that? Perfect. Thank you all. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline, and thank you to all of our attendees today. Again, I will email the link and Madeline's PowerPoint beginning of next week. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out by email and let me know. Everybody have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you.